from here, so I'll wait for them to do that from there. I just want to say thank you for coming and joining us tonight. The program is called Old Glory. It's about a history of our flag, and we do live in a great nation. We are allowed many freedoms that others do not have. And out of curiosity, do we have any servicemen or women here with us tonight? How many are from the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force? Just a big, huge thank you, thank you, thank you. Greatly, greatly appreciate your service. My name is Mandy. I'm with Brown Funeral Home, and this is Steve Herendeen. And before we get too much further into the program, I'd actually like to introduce you to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, if you don't mind coming up. It's really loud.
There's one in every crowd. You see who that is already. Thanks for coming this evening. Hope you enjoyed the food. The Skillet has always provided our food for us, so if you liked it, you can always let people know. They're the ones that have done that. We of course pay them to do that, but they do it, and we always enjoy eating leftovers. And tonight there's a lot of leftovers, so the funeral staff's going to be eating chicken for days unless some of you want to go back in and get another plate. I want to thank Steve Herendeen for being here today to talk about tonight's program. I want to thank all of you for your service as well. I'm going to introduce Larry Thompson. A new position we brought on here at the funeral home this year is a liaison for veteran services. So just another way for us to reconnect with veterans and to make sure that if there are any benefits that are coming up or that you're entitled to or your families are entitled to, we want to make sure we stay on top of that as well as assisting you in any way we can. But Larry Thompson is, again, our liaison in charge of Veterans Outreach and Veteran Services. So if he would stand, that's him in the back. He also serves as the Post-51 American Legion chaplain, as well as works here at the funeral home. So he thinks he's retired, but he works as many hours as the rest of us around here. So again, I want to thank you for coming and for just being here and participating in tonight's discussion. I'm looking forward to it. I did not serve in the armed forces, but if you would know my mother, you would know that I feel like I was in the service. But again, we thank you all for your service, for coming this evening, and just hopefully you'll get some information tonight. But hopefully as well, if you've got some questions, don't be afraid to ask. And you're in capable hands between Mandy and Steve this evening. So thank you again for coming. Winston is here. I will bring him down before you leave, but I will tell you he's had a very busy day. He's had a very busy week last week into the weekend and then on into today. Today was spa day, so he goes to Bunkin' Biscuits where the girls there, he loves to swim, so they have him. He's our golden retriever, so he's a therapy dog, a grief therapy dog is what essentially he is. We say he's staff therapy, but he went today to Bunkin' Biscuits where they let him play with other dogs. He kind of gets a day off, and he goes swimming. The girls there have been teaching him dock diving. So they throw things off this dock and he runs and jumps in, and they like to put him in competitions. Can you believe that? So he is very tired, but he will wake himself up by the end tonight to come down and be able to introduce everyone, or I can introduce you to all of you to him. And he'll be excited to see everyone that's here today. So without further ado, Steve, we'll have you take over and share the program, and thank you again for being with us tonight.
Thank you. You guys could be in for a long night. It used to be that on the food, the rules were that no one can leave until all the food was gone. So Tim must have changed a little bit so the staff might help you out. But it's a pleasure to be here. I've done a lot of things for veterans. Actually, I got thinking about this one day, and I started when I was about 7 years old in this little organization called Cub Scouts. And through time, I have done where I put flags out on cemeteries, and we have veterans programs of different, the Korean War and World War II and that. And this is probably one of my favorite programs, is the history of the flag. So I'm going to test your knowledge today. How long has it been since you've been in school? Why is everybody laughing? You know, I have my 40th high school reunion coming up at the end of July. So does anybody beat that? 40. And you admit it? No. But we might, anybody remember when you were in school, who did they say helped design the flag? Do you remember any names? All right, Betsy Ross. So we might find something a little different that today. When I was in school, I heard the same thing. So this is a fun program of education. So we'll walk through this a little bit. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to see how the flags are displayed different ways. We'll kind of walk through that. But I was kind of fortunate because my youngest son, I've got 3 kids. The youngest one was a swimmer. And he was fortunate in 2012 to make the United States Olympic team. Swam at 18, 19 years old and finished 7th, 8th, 9th in the world. And then he went to Rio in 2016 where he finished 4th. But I say that to you only because, interesting, in 2012 when we went to England to watch him swim, this flag had an interesting story because they told the United States swimmers that when you go into your building where you're staying, they didn't allow them to put any of the flags up on the building because there was some things going on in the world at that time. They were actually kind of nervous that if people knew where the United States swim team was at staying, that they might do something to them. And so interesting, all the other countries had their flags up on their building. The only team that didn't was U.S. team, and they knew where they're at anyway because of that situation. So it's kind of interesting. But I'm going to go back track a little bit on some of these pictures. We have one of the most recognized flags in the world. What a sign of freedom that we have. I have a brother that actually served 16 and a half years in the Army and would have done more than that, but he was in Bosnia, Desert Storm. And through that, he had some neck injuries where he had 2 neck operations and had to come out at a medical discharge. And so when you talk to people like him and that World War II generation, which is, what were they called? Yeah, I've been blessed because I am 58. I'll be 59 in November. And so when the age that I am now, when I started this in 1983, that's what the World War II veterans were. And I was so blessed because if you know anything about that, they're so patriotic. And when you talk about the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance and all that sort of thing and parades, those people had it. And my mother was born in 1941, so her dad, my grandfather, 1897, so it was passed down from him to her. And unfortunately, a little bit kind of got off track in our generation that we are in today. But when you look at these pictures, as I start to backtrack a little bit here, the first one you see the flag that was on the barn, if you will. And that's obviously probably was a farmer who was so proud of the flag that he decided to have it painted on his barn. Just a couple shots here, a big building downtown, like probably in New York or somewhere where they presented and had the flag. This is kind of like the building that Dalton stayed in England, and all the countries had their flags outside their rooms like that, but the U.S., they wouldn't allow them to do that. This is the New York Stock Exchange, and so probably on Flag Day or Veterans Day, 4th of July, they had displayed the flag. This is what I started to do when I was in Cub Scouts when I was about 7. I still do it. I've been doing it for about 53 years. I'll take flags out to the cemeteries and mark veterans' grave sites. Just some interesting photos of the sun coming through that flag. This is on the inside, big flag there with the sunlight coming through it. A lot of people don't realize that on the coastal waterways there's always a lighthouse and there's always a flag showing that you're close to the United States, our country. Again, flags that are marked on the cemetery gravesite. And then its majesty and power have inspired great deeds of heroism and bravery throughout time. Thousands have given their lives to protect this message of liberty, and millions live today remembering and honoring that bravery. For nearly 2.5 centuries, the American flag has flown as an ensign of freedom and message of hope to the world. But to us, it is our flag, the Star-Spangled Banner, the promise of the American dream. And so that begins our program on Old Glory. So I shared with you, I'm going to test your knowledge here. go back this way. So everyone has a little miniature flag. So if you need to use that as we ask some questions here, don't hesitate. But the flag facts. The first question: what does the Flag Day commemorate? Does anyone know? When was Flag Day? Yeah, it's great. Right, June 14th. So it's great timing of our program here because we had June 14th was Flag Day. We just celebrated July 4th. And so again, Flag Day commemorates the first official approved flag. So we got our independence in 1776. So in 1777, June 14th, that was the first officially approved flag. So I'm going to step back just a little bit here. Just jumped ahead of us a little bit here. So let me do this. All right, so back to the flag facts. What color is the most bottom stripe of the U.S. flag? Anybody have to look at your flag to do that? Are you sure? All right, it's red. So we got the first one right. They might get a little bit more tricky as we move forward. How many rows of stars are on the flag? So rows of stars. Not how many stars, but rows. Someone said 9 over here. Yeah, so there's 9. So there's 9 rows of stars on the flag. And then how many U.S. flags are on the moon? Okay, everybody says 1. 6. Yeah, why are there 6 flags on the moon? For each Apollo mission. So back in the day when they had the Apollo missions, every time they put a flag. Now it's interesting, history-wise, they started out with 6, and now there's really 5. Because one of the trips to the moon, the rocket ship got too close to the flag and burnt it. And so there's only 5 actually there now. So, all right. And when did the current flag design become the official flag? Yeah, you're pretty close. This easy one for me to remember because it's almost as old as I am. July 4th, 1960. After what state was omitted? Hawaii. Right, right. So very good. And we talked about what Flag Day represents, so we'll move forward through that. So remember I asked you that question earlier, who designed the flag, right? And some people mentioned Betsy Ross. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that question here. So here's the question. Who designed the first flag and what did the original flag look like? Ready for the answer? We don't actually know. Isn't that crazy? So here's the most recognized flag in the world, and we're proud of it, and we actually don't know. But here's the story. There was a number of flag designs that were popular, and unfortunately there is no historic record of exactly who designed the first flag and how it was designed. Now, as they did their research through books and things there at the White House, it says it is likely that the first flag was designed, at least in part, by Francis Hopkinson of New Jersey. So anybody ever heard of that guy? Me either. So he was an original signer of the Declaration of Independence and a member of Congress. So as they did research on this fella, what they found, that evidence indicates that he sent a bill to Congress asking for a quarter cask of public wine. But the payment was not made as it was determined his salary as a member of Congress was sufficient to cover his work. So somehow in the archives, as they were reading things, they saw that this fellow sent a request for wanting to be paid for the flag, but they didn't do that because he was a member of Congress, and they said his salary would cover his work. It was also noted that he was not the only person who had contributed to the design. In fact, it wasn't until 1912 and our 48th state that the layout of the stars was even standardized. And again, and not till 1934 that the exact colors meant to be used on the flag were dictated. So you get that. We had our Flag Day, June 14th, 1777. And then this is the interesting stuff, and we'll kind of get a little bit more depth. But think it wasn't until 1912. So the first flag, official flag, was accepted in 1777. However, it wasn't until 1912 that when we added the 48th state, that the layout of the stars was even standardized. So there were different patterns that we'll kind of walk you through. And then it wasn't until 1934 that the exact colors meant anything. So it's always been red, white, and blue. But if you were to ask somebody what the red stood for, no one had an answer for that. So we'll kind of walk through a little bit here. So those are the different designs of the flag that they had. And so I'm going to share with you a couple other designs that were interesting and important to us. So this one here, 1837 to 1845. Have you ever seen this flag before? Why would it be important to us? Any guesses? No one was around in 1837, 1845. This is when Michigan was entered into the Union as a state. So when Michigan entered the state, or in the Union, 1837, 1845, they changed the configuration of the stars. Okay? And so they did this a few more times. So the next pattern was this pattern here, 1847, 1848, and that was with the admission of Iowa. So when Iowa became a state, and then they did it one other time, they went back to a star configuration that they kind of put them closer together, 1859, 1861, and that was with Oregon. So when Oregon became a state. And then the last kind of dynamic change of what we're used to now, 1877, 1890, and that's when Colorado became a state. So those when those states became actual states, they changed the configuration of the star a little bit there. So today we talked about, that's a flag that you have there on your table that was handed out. And so again, this flag is flown for how many years? 59. So July 4th here of 2019 was its birthday from 1960. So 59 years. Okay? So with that, I'm going to share with you a little bit on the color. So does everybody recognize this? The Great Seal of the United States. So when the president is speaking somewhere by the podium or close to it, you'll see the Great Seal of the United States. Well, that breastplate is red, white, and blue. So since that's the Great Seal of the United States, and they had the same colors of red, white, and blue, they decided, well, why don't we have those colors mean something? So they went ahead and did that through an act of Congress. And so we'll kind of walk you through a little bit. What do you think the color red represented? Blood. Yeah, a lot of people always say blood because we've been through so many battles and everything to keep our freedom and get our freedom. But actually, the red represents hardiness and valor. Okay? So that's what the red represents. And then we have white. Any guesses on that? Purity. Very good. So she said purity. So that's definitely one of them. And innocence. Okay? And then we have the last color, blue. Any guesses? Loyalty. Okay? So it's vigilance, perseverance, and justice. So now when you see the colors red, white, and blue, that's actually the meaning behind those colors. Okay? So it's really interesting. This next one I want to share with you a picture of this flag. But prior to this, so we talked about the configuration of the stars. We talked about how many rows were there? 9 rows. How many stars? 15. And then the stripes are how many? 13. And those 13 stripes represent? All right, so remember I asked you earlier, how long has it been since you've been in school? So who can name the 13 colonies? Anybody brave enough to do that? You want to give it? He might be able to help. He's naming off. You want to give it a try?
Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine.
You know what? You did so. Yeah, you got there you go, New Hampshire. Now, Massachusetts, yep, you got them. Yeah, I think you got them all. That's awesome, man. That's very good. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think anybody's ever got them all like that. In fact, it's funny because I always back when I was in school, that was one of the quizzes we had to take. And so one of my best friends from school, Mark Scholl, he and I, we took the test and we tease each other today, and that's been over 50 years. And the reason we tease, because that's one quiz that I got them all right. But he missed one. It was Virginia. And what he's been teased about is because that was his mother's name. Yeah, so that wasn't a good one to forget. So now this flag here, I saw this. This is, any guesses what this flag might be other than just a picture of an old flag? Any guesses?
Fort McHenry.
Yeah, perfect. So this is the original flag that Francis Scott Key penned the Star-Spangled Banner, okay? And if you go to Washington, D.C., which I was fortunate in 2013 to do that, this is in the Smithsonian Institute in a weather-preserved environment, if you will. So I want to kind of, just so I don't miss anything, read that as well. So again, this flag inspired Francis Scott Key, Star-Spangled Banner. The original flag was 42 feet wide and 30 feet tall. And it says, as you can see, it's very weathered and has missing pieces. So if you look up there, some of the holes, especially where the stars are at, that empty spot right in the middle. So it's interesting. Those pieces were cut out as mementos. So I don't know if someone in those days thought that, boy, that flag's going to mean something one of these days, so they cut it out for mementos. Again, today the flag is displayed in the climate control viewing area in the Smithsonian American History Museum in Washington, D.C. So, does anybody know the war? So, does anyone know the war that Francis Scott Key penned, the Star-Spangled, the War of 1812? And it was written in 1814. Okay, so but the War of 1812. Now, it's interesting. What is now our national anthem actually started out as a poem that Key wrote called The Defense of Fort McHenry. And then the words were later put into a popular British song that was already popular in the United States. So that's the history of the Star-Spangled Banner. Now, it's what'd you say?
It's a bar song.
Yeah, so get this. So that was, I don't know, a few times I did this prior. A fellow was there, and he said, you know what, that was a drinking song. And they said a bar song, same thing. So it's interesting, the history of the Star-Spangled Banner. Going a little step further, it says in 1931, so get that, 1931, more than a century after it was written, the Star-Spangled Banner became the official national anthem by act of Congress. So you think from 1777 all through 1812 and all going up through time, it wasn't until 1931 that officially the Star-Spangled Banner became our national anthem. Previous to that, there were about 3 other songs that kind of acted as that purpose. Anybody guess what those songs might be?
America the Beautiful, God Bless America.
Great guesses. The first one was a song I never even heard of called Hail, Hail. The second song was Columbia. And then the third song you'll recognize, My Country. Yeah, so those are the 3 songs that were served, if you will, as our national anthem until officially in 1931 the Star-Spangled Banner became the national anthem. So interesting history. The flag that we talked about over here, this is the 27th version. So from 1777, the official approved flag on Flag Day, up to our current time, the flag that you have on your table is the 27th version of the flag, of the different patterns that we had throughout time. And I'm going to test your knowledge again. How many flags were on the moon?
5.
All right, well, you're paying attention. And they were 6 flags originally were on the moon because of the Apollo missions, right? Okay, and So it's interesting as we go forward, believe it or not, there might come a point in time where there could be another country that enters as a state, for the United States, Puerto Rico, for example. So this, again, isn't anything official, but there are people that are working on the star configuration. And so if we added another state up in the left-hand corner, they kept the stars in rows, but they're a little bit more alternative back and forth between long and short. And then the bottom right-hand corner, the stars more in a circular motion again. So again, nothing official, but someone is kind of working on that. The other thing I wanted to share with you, an interesting fact, and going back to that Star Spangled Banner, the fourth stanza of that song, anybody know what our motto is of the United States?
In God we trust.
Yeah, it's on our coins, right? So it's interesting. My dad got me collecting coins back in when I was young. And so if you look back, even some coins in the 1700s, you'll find "In God We Trust" on them. So I just assumed from time beginning that was our motto, right? But here's another interesting fact. It wasn't until 1956 that "In God Our Trust," through an act of Congress, became our official motto of the United States. "In God We Trust," okay? And I share that with you because some of you might have seen the 13 folds of the flag, and I kind of want to read that to you. But again, it's interesting. A lot of things that we assumed was already there. It wasn't officially till maybe several years, 50 years, 100 years later, through an act of Congress that made things official. So I'll leave you with this thought before we go to the 13 folds of the flag. This picture kind of goes along with what I'm going to say to you. It says this here, that what does the future hold for the United States? No one can be sure, but we do know one thing. We can all be responsible supporters of the legacy of our nation. Thousands of men and women have been born, lived, and died under the freedom of our flag, and many have given their lives for that freedom. And for that, we remember them as we honor Old Glory today. The thing towards the end I wanted to share with you, in your folder, you have a piece called the 13 Folds of the Flag. And I guess I would say my hope is one of these days, but through an act of Congress, that they'll make this official. But since we have veterans in the room and we're talking about Old Glory, and we had the July 4th and Flag Day here a month or so ago, I'm going to read this to you because if you go to a veteran service or if you watch a veteran service on television, there's different ways, they present the flag. Sometimes it can be folded in the head panel of the casket. Sometimes it can be draped over the casket, and then it's folded in front of the next of kin, then presented to them, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is that when they're folding that flag, each one of those folds actually has a meaning. And so this has been written down. Like I said, it's nothing official. Maybe hopefully one of the days it will be through act of Congress. But I just want to read this to you because, again, when you see a veteran service or watching something on television, you know what the meaning of those folds are. So it says this: the first fold of our flag is a symbol of life. The second fold is a symbol of our belief in eternal life. The third fold is made in honor and remembrance of the veterans departing our ranks who have given portion of their lives for the defense of our country to attain peace throughout the world. The fourth fold represents our weaker nature, for as American citizens trusting in God, it is to Him we turn in times of peace, as well as in times of war for His divine guidance. The fifth fold is a tribute to our country, for in the words of Stephen Decatur, our country in dealing with other countries, may she always be right, but it is still our country, right or wrong. The sixth fold is for where our hearts lie. It is with our heart that we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The seventh fold is a tribute to our armed forces, for it is through them that we protect our country and our flag against all her enemies, whether they be found within or without the boundaries of our republic. The 8th fold is a tribute to the one who entered in the valley of the shadow of death, that we might see the light of day. The 9th fold is a tribute to womanhood and mothers, for it has been through their faith, their love, their loyalty, and their devotion that the character of the men and women who have made this country great has been molded. The 10th fold is a tribute to the Father, for he too has given his sons and daughters for the defense of our country since they were first born. The 11th fold represents a lower portion of the seal of King David and King Solomon, and glorifies in the Hebrews' eyes the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The 12th fold represents an emblem of eternity and glorifies in the Christian's eyes God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And finally, the 13th fold, or when the flag is completely folded, the stars are in the uppermost, reminding us of our nation's motto, "In God We Trust." And if that flag is actually folded correctly, how many stars do you see on top? 4, because it represents each branch of the service. It's kind of hard sometimes to get those things always folded, but if it's folded correctly, you'll see 4 stars on top, and it represents each branch of the service. So, did you learn anything about the flag tonight? All right, very good. Well, it's been an honor and a privilege to spend some time with you. I'm going to turn this maybe a little bit over to Mandy, see if she has anything. I know the surveys, perhaps on those folders, you've got some information in there. If you haven't, it'd be very helpful for you to, if you fill those out, you can give them to Mandy. It just helps us how you heard about the event, so we can do a better job of getting the information and share this information with more families. So appreciate your attention. And Mandy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. Had many known the folding of the flag? Had many known what each fold represented before? It's beautiful. It really is. And as many times as I have been a part of a veteran's service, and it really doesn't matter if I know the person or don't know the person, it is one of the most touching services that I'm allowed to be a part of. And so I am grateful for our country. I'm grateful for our freedom and the life that we get to live. I do want to tell you that for those of you who are on social media, we do we call them community education programs. You're always welcome to connect with our funeral home. We do often advertise them. And I don't think anyone's here that went with me, but we just had a trip to Fort Custer. So for any of you veterans that are in the room, you have so many benefits that I hope you're taking advantage of. And one of the really beautiful benefits is that you and your spouse have free burials at any national cemeteries. And please watch our Facebook, or even we do advertising in the senior center, but we will feed you 2 meals that day. You get 2 meals, breakfast and lunch. We'll take you to Fort Custer, show you the beautiful cemetery, feed you lunch, and bring you back. But again, for the veterans who are sitting in our presence today, please make sure if you're a veteran, you're getting your benefits. That's just really important. When you sacrificed what you did, you had no idea if you would be coming home to us or not. And so as a nation, we want to make sure that you're getting the things that you deserve. Before I let you leave this evening, 2 things. I'm sorry. Sorry. Before I let you go this evening, I want to make sure that you don't have any questions for us, not only as the funeral home, if you have any questions specifically for Steve, or if you just have any comments. Okay, if you don't ask me any questions, everybody will need to take a plate home with them, or we can, okay. Oh, there really are lots of extras. Yes.
As a trip to Fort Custer, I mean, the whole thing, if you're not a veteran, can you go as well?
I suppose. Yeah, it is designed so that our veterans and their spouses know what their benefits are. We have several national cemeteries in the U.S. Fort Custer just happens to be closest to us, but I had a non-veteran that went on the tour, and then they were able to be a spokesperson for lots of other people and just let them know about their benefits. If you've never been to Fort Custer is one of 7 national cemeteries that have what they call a shrine accommodation attached to it. It has so well manicured and taken care of, and the people that work there, many are volunteers, and they are lovely. They're just lovely people who really are passionate about what they do. And there's lots of history there. There's even a section of German soldiers that are buried at Fort Custer, and there's quite a history behind that. So if you ever get a chance, it's about 73 miles away from here, and it's worth the drive. It's absolutely worth the drive. Any other questions? Yes. No, how about?
Are you guys gonna do this again, have the about the flag?
I don't have the flag one scheduled. I think our next one is actually, we're having one at the Legion in regards to veterans benefits, and I believe that's coming up in October, but I'll have to check my calendar just to make sure. But I don't have the Old Glory one scheduled again this year. We do lots of different community education programs. So we do one for veterans, one about Old Glory. We do another one that's just about commonly asked questions about cremation, and we do another one that's just commonly asked funeral questions.
And from our filling this out,
Yes.
we'll contact us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions? No. Well, you are free to stay or free to go. I won't hold you hostage. But thank you again. And I just really appreciate you taking your time to spend the evening with me. Probably if you know you were going to spend it with me, you may not have come, but I do appreciate you coming anyways. And yes, as you exit, many of you came in the front door, and you are welcome to exit that way. But if you go down this little corridor, there's a side door that leads right up open to our parking lot. So you're welcome to use that as well. Thank you.